it dropped! It's on it! 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 Hello, comrades! Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. I will get to you, my left eye, after we've seen this. I will get to you, my left eye, after we've seen this. I will get to you, my left eye, after we've seen this. I will get to you, my left eye, after we've seen this.
Ese es un plano beta araña donde construimos nuestro hogar. Pise la giromante cuando vaya.
Hi, hello, and hola! Welcome back to our favorite mech tabletop RPG, Lancer, where today we're talking about Los Voladores, the ethereal, mysterious, highly advanced interstellar traders, and one of the few factions with access to ready FTL, or shipboard FTL. Keeping with that, or not the FTL part of it, but they are mysterious, like capital M mysterious. There's very little actually known about them, and they like to keep it that way. But their general gist is trying to stay out of everything. They don't really pick any of the big sides on the galactic stage, except for one case earlier. But we'll touch that in the history. The Los Voladores are pacifist, highly advanced nomadic space traders, and always in those suits. Always. You never see them outside of it, or at least no one outside of Los Voladores has seen anyone outside of a suit. And it's not just the suit that makes them mysterious, it's also their height or their physical stature. They're very thin, tall, and I mean, compare it to the height of these other people put next to it, or them, though under some of the theories could be in it. But that's tall, that's very tall, leading to various rumors of maybe they grew on like some high gravity or slight gravity world. It's all the space flight before artificial gravity, a distant cousin of humanity splitting off early on, even before the 10, or maybe just aliens, just hiding. Plenty of strange stories and theories and just no one really knowing, rumors. Quite personalized. I mean, there's the example of, you know, the base Voladore example, and then one in the long rim, or the cover of the long rim. But then you also have this one, also from the long rim. Yeah, they can get, those suits can get quite strange. But to clear up something before actually going into history, why I consider them one of the major galactic powers and not the Albatross. Galactic powers isn't the best way to put it, maybe state actors, galactic states. Even though they're nomadic, they have some kind of central authority. The big difference is they have an actual political tie to Union. They have an embassy on Cradle. The Albatross don't. And they can pull their own military weight. Not necessarily in large numbers, but in very deadly weaponry. And mercenaries. They might be pacifists, but there's some limits they are willing to cross, and before that point they have mercenaries to do the painful part for them. But to their history, we don't have their perspective, we only have it from Union's perspective. So back to Union and First Committee's first expansion period. Heading out into the stars, briefly setting up colonies or reconnecting with old ones, and strange reports are coming in of some kind of other interstellar vessel. Another group that had managed to connect or go in between these different new galactic powers or fledgling colonies. Supposedly peaceful, so they sent out a Farfield team. Farfield teams are expeditions similar in the Star Trek sense of like exploration and diplomacy. Farfield Team 1683, led by Dr. Oberon Sterling, managed to make contact with one of these vessels, and actually ends up making diplomatic ties back to Union. And upon first inspection, they're labeled as a stateless pre-fall society that's separated from all of humanity during the fall, or before the fall. However, that description, the more they learned, kind of faltered, because originally they thought it was just this one small fleet of ships, and that quickly changed. Part of that change was some kind of connection or embassy to a place called Hightower, or position called Hightower. A loose central authority or capital, or at least representative for the Voladores. So even though they're separated into a bunch of these nomadic family groups or structures, they're all tied back or have some kind of authority within Hightower that they listen to, as far as we know. But with these diplomatic ties set up, the Voladores begin trading throughout all of new fledgling Union space, with their ships even appearing directly above Cradle, bringing in bounty of technology, material from across the galaxy, and most importantly, survey data. Survey data of habitable worlds that for some reason they never colonized. They had easy access to find it, travel there, and instantly come back and just gave the information away, or traded it. This is another plus in Union Circle, another thing backing them and helping for their push for expansion. And where I said that the Voladores were already kinda taking sides, namely because the other galactic power around at the time, the Karrakin Trade Baronies, Los Voladores didn't really trust them. They preferred to trade freely with First Com Union and the territories under it. However, as the fledgling hegemony began to turn towards SecCom, or Second Committee, under its unification campaign, they deemed the Voladores as a part of that. So harassing of ships, attempted capture, all culminating in one attempted boarding by a deniable asset group, the Vanguard Security. And they actually made it on board. They managed to breach a ship, but not take control of it. And after that point, the Voladores just vanished from space. Union space. They vanished from Union space. Anywhere in the hegemony. Just vanished. For a good chunk of time, up until now. Like, modern timeline. Not even after like, oh, Third Com's in charge, we'll come back. Hundreds of years after. It's only now there are reports again off on the periphery in the diaspora that they're beginning to think that the hegemony is safe or that they can come back and trade. And even though none of them have come back to Cradle, diplomatic ties have been opened up again. Potentially. Again, don't have a lot of information. That's their history, that's the bits of it we get at least. Through the perception of Union and the hegemony. But now this mysterious force is back. This mysterious pacifist traders, these nomadic groups, and really advanced in tech. So now that the history's done, we're gonna talk about just the things we actually know, the little bits and pieces here or there. So first, the embassy on Cradle. It's entirely automated. There are not Los Voladores just actively stationed there. Entirely automated, leading to just a single console that you can attempt to contact high ground. And it's never guaranteed. And not only is it never guaranteed, Union doesn't know how they pick who represents. They switch people by some unknown means. But apparently acts as some central hub or authority or communication base for the other different matrias. And to the matrias! That is how they organize themselves. These matrias are coalitions of family units that are spread across either one trade ship or multiple small Voladores trade ships. These small nomadic pockets and groups that then travel and trade. Each of these is led by a matriarchal council of elders, who are responsible for the decisions involving the entire trade ship and the different bits of temporal logging. Oh, and they're not just matriarchal in their council, they're also matrilineal as a society, or family structure. It's believed that these matrias are a very conservative bunch, but outside of not being able to actually examine what's going on between just one of them, let alone all of them. Though it's pretty safe to bet that no one can actually join a matria from the outside. Los Voladores, Los Voladores. But to those trade ships they occupy, they are an all-in-one suite, and are large. Both a habitat, a workshop, being able to take in raw resources and manufacture on the ship, and an inbuilt marketplace between the individual families and for anyone they invite on board. A lot of them with their own internal bazaar structure. Though not all of their ships are like this, some smaller matrias or assumed less influential or less wealthy are seen flying around and Union-designed freighters. Customized, but initially based off or using Union designs. And while I mentioned they were pacifist earlier, and still are, they have mercenaries. In fact, are quite commonly associated with Spari mercenaries, sometimes kept on board or just traveling alongside the Matrias. And the pacifism is only the Los Voladores, which they are also willing to cross at a certain point. But before that, the enforcement is the mercenaries' job. There's an example of some of them from the Baja Mesa, and they're all just casually kitted out in Atlas gear. So well-paying merc work. But one of their big shticks is trading technology. But in their hesitant ways, it's trading technology and diplomacy. Diplomacy in the fact of acting as a third party between these interstellar powers, able to send messages or at least get things across to someone quick enough. And you gotta be a pretty good diplomat to not get shot at right away when just randomly appearing above a planet or on a planet. And of this trade, it's sometimes raw resources, but rarely in the bulk of IPSN or the trade baronies. Primarily strange relics, collector's items, and in particular, technology. Either experimental, advanced, or just unknown and strange. Except their own. They don't trade their own. They keep that for themselves. Unless it's something that they studied and deemed either worthless or dangerous, and then they'll hand it over to you. There's always exceptions that prove the rule. Maybe in that case. And another strange bit, tying back to that technology maybe, while Los Voladores are incredibly sparse to be found anywhere in the diaspora even, being a very rare occasion, commonly being misconstrued for aliens or strange myths of such, they do however commonly appear above worlds or systems with pre-fall tech or colonies. For some reason. Though, on to said tech, not just the pre-fall kind, though maybe the pre-fall kind, what the Voladores have, which is just one of my favorite bits about them. The reason that they do interstellar trade and just can screw off away from Union and still be able to get somewhere faster than them. They have shipborne FTL. They have shipboard FTL. They don't have to rely on the mega projects or system of gates that Union has. And their only competition in the FTL field is the firmament manipulation that the On use. This is seen through evidence of the fact that, again, they don't have to rely on the gate system, they just disappeared for hundreds of years, and could get away, always. In the case of the Long Rim, it's the Baja Mesa being able to just beat you to stations ahead of you, or go back and then back again ahead of you. But in particular, it's the good old Sunzi, an experimental Harrison Armory chassis using tech either stolen or traded or gained from the Los Voladores in some way. It's rumored to be stolen, but it could have been traded, namely because they have documents and what seems like Los Voladores talking to them. In particular, this line because of the meaning. But in either case, the things the Sunzi can do, yes, that's just an FTL engine strapped to its head, or where a head would be, anatomically at least. They really did just take a chassis with various bits of Blinkgate meshing that they took from the Napoleon, and then they just strapped a reverse-engineered FTL engine to its head. And it's not just a mech they're testing this equipment on. If you're following Battlefleet, they're also testing this on ships. Not quite full FTL, at least not over the distances they want, but still significantly useful in a battlefield scenario or fleet scenario. So one, FTL of some kind, proper shipboard FTL. And another key one, stable artificial gravity. Yes, there's spin gravity, but I mean the classic sci-fi, there's a down on the ship. The evidence for this one is within the Long Rim again, with one of the bases of a syndicate being within an old trade ship of the Voladores, and the gravity is still stable in the Bazaar. Then you can get into some of the more vaguer elements, like their life support systems, but potentially their medicine, just stuff we have no idea about. The fact that they have so much high-end technology or experimental stuff are strange anomalies that they're just willing to trade or get rid of, having discovered, made, or keeping the best for themselves in either case. And they know the value of this. They are very, very timid on how they deal with trade. Again, the mercenaries, the general pacifist ways, but if you steal their technology, they're coming after you. Now listen, they're willing to find a diplomatic solution or trade to most things. Their technology, however, that's it, or themselves, their secrets, their matrias, all of that is off limits. Off limits. Well-armed and equipped Spari mercenaries will be coming after you. Due to that trade and paranoia, they don't use the OmniNet. Most of their communication is short range, well, stellar short range, and then just meeting or trading in person. They don't have all this licenses stuff, they just deal in the physical. You are physically coming aboard their ship into a bazaar to trade with them, face to face, or face to mask. But they're also not just this vague, distant etheric thing. I mean, they are, especially in most of your games, but within the Long Rim, you find one. There is a trade ship you bump into, multiple times, potentially. The Baja Mesa, and we get a description of a Voladore ship, just under a kilometer wide, half of that fore to aft, and forming a single wing silhouette. And after hearing that single wing silhouette part, I just thought it's the Mother World ship cut in half. It might not be, but I don't know. But yeah, that's Los Voladores. We just don't have much of them, at all. They're just a mystery again, similar to Ra and some of the rumors about them. There's plenty of rumors about the Voladores. Instead of being this scary galactic boogeyman, they're peaceful traders. They're not necessarily trying to unify, conquer, form up hegemony, forcing alliances, just trading technology, materials, living within their own circles, giving out different survey data of colonizable worlds, actively helping. Or at least to their benefit of trade. As far as we know, though, again, we don't know that much. And that is alarming. Not in the sense they're particularly malicious, another boogeyman waiting to happen. They'll defend themselves, they'll hunt you down if you've wronged them, but they have a track record lasting thousands of years. They're just interested in this trade, going around, travel, sticking to their matrias and high ground, wanting to keep the rest of the galaxy a safe distance away, but just close enough to be a part of it. No, the true worry comes with their tech. What they represent, what they stand for, what they stood for to SETCOM. As while they share some of their bounty, they keep some of it held away, and with the galactic powers, that is a holy grail that will change the game. Thank you for watching the video on Los Voladores. Hopefully I pronounced that right. But yeah, we don't have much to work off of. In some ways a benefit. You can use it for multiple storytelling opportunities. They're a wide, blank canvas with some structure, with some shapes and borders that you can fill in on the galactic stage. And yes, while there's some more that went in with the Los Voladores within the Sunzi, I'm saving that for that license. It's a bit more particular to it. You know, you kind of spoil the whole thing if you just did the license here. But it's here I actually want to call out in the comments, what are some matrias that you would design, or some speculation you have of the Los Voladores, or various ways they've appeared in your games? And then another addendum, how much of an impact do you think the tech of the Sunzi and their shipborne version of it is going to have on the galactic powers? Currently just loosely being experimented on within the long rim or distant parts of the diaspora, trying to keep it away from other competition or union. But anyway, thank you again for watching, a thank you to my patrons, and buenos dias.
It's too fucking hot. Oh, God. I will be back. Give me a minute. Do everything hot.
Today we're talking about the beating industrial heart and grim truth for Union, the Karakin trade baronies, with a very fancy emphasis on the barony part. Hi, hello, and welcome back to Lancer, our favorite mech tabletop RPG, where we're talking about the noble feudal knights of the future with the Karakin trade baronies. For all the massive grand projects Union holds, all its utopian dreams, pillars, and ideals, all of that is enforced, fueled, even alongside the megacorps, by the Karakin trade baronies. There is no modern-day Union without the Karakin trade baronies. None. It happened with Secom, is still going on with ThirdCom. It is needed for the utopian dream. It's a debated point, so 1, 2, 3, 4, I think maybe more. It's the grim truth of the New Prosperity Agreement. Union does not stand on its own without the Karakin trade baronies. They are both interlocked with each other. While there is a Union citizen on a core world enjoying the wealth of all life, cybernetics, biomods, everything at their fingertips with no cost of mana, there's some ignoble suffering on a mining camp within the Karakin trade baronies. Or the rest of their interest. Because yes, it's not just the 9 worlds of the Karakin trade baronies, nor the 9 systems. It stretches much, much farther. But before we head too much into the modern-day workings of the Karakin trade baronies, let's learn how this massive galactic industrial powerhouse found its footing. So the history of the Karakin trade baronies stretches way, way back to before the fall, on one of the first of the 10, the Apollo. The 10 themselves being 10 significant generation ships that were sent out from Earth before the fall. Sent initially both to help with the current running of Earth and the problems it's been suffering, but later on just act as its own continuation of humanity as the rest of the Sol system fell apart. Now, when it comes to the history specifically, compared to all the other megacorps or factions we've covered so far, Karakin Space has its own field guide. It's dense, or at least dense compared to any of the other faction material we've had so far. So for the sake of that, we're going to be compressing this down real quickly. So we have the Long Quiet, which is all the stuff beforehand, or before what's considered modern Karakin history, or Karakin history in general. It's a nice colony, it's left with its own colonial charter, and it's kind of sending wake shipping back and forth between itself and Earth. It's sending raw materials back to Earth, Earth is sending advanced equipment back to them. Wake shipping being just automated ships going back and forth, following in the wake of a colonial venture. So out of everything, relatively normal. It's a sci-fi colony out in the distance, one of the first extrasolar that is. There was plenty of settlements within the Sol system. Then eventually news comes back from Earth. The fall has begun, or at least has hit proper. The Sol system is just an utter wreck. Internal fighting, bickering, the internal biosphere of planet Earth just falling apart, same thing with different colonial ventures. The humans of planet Earth are essentially just all dead, as far as Caracas is concerned. And with that meant that the people currently running the planet, or had the colonial charter, and those currently buying off of Wake Trade and all their current station based off their relation to Earth, began to panic. Panic and power grab. Essentially the planetary governor declaring some kind of martial law, all the different people from the Wake traders, different militant groups, all claiming different factories and locations underneath the colonial governor. Which lasts roughly about, 4 months maybe? Less than a year. As all of those different forces and the people rebelling against that, everything just falls apart. It's called the Melee. As internal warfare, bickering, the entire colony tears itself apart. The Melee lasts 600 years. At the end point, it had turned into basically a feudal state, with different noble barons holding on to different bits of tech, factories, the people they can actually arm, with the original settlement, Karaka, being this entire horrible wasteland. And ruins set up with different scavengers and high-tech banditry. Just a total mess, just a total feudal sci-fi mess. Until eventually, you have Passacaglia the First. A pretty much mythological figure now, and so much history that's been edited, any of this can be just taken to be fake. But supposedly, having been ignoble born, fighting and conquering their way through everything else, taking scavengers, forming an army from the ruins of Karaka, eventually uniting the planet. A very unification war situation. And as a part of this, restarting the sciences, studying old tech, taking over ships that were left in orbit mothballed. Not slowly building its way back up or internal fighting or squabbling anymore, but just an instant reboot on what was going on. As it continues on, Caracas begins colonizing different planets, namely its own moon, terraforming that a bit, and spreading out further and further. A relative golden age to a point. Also bumping into an already colonized world and dealing with it. It's also important to note that during this time, Passacaglia didn't get rid of the noble system. In fact, very much still supported it to an extent, or still was a part of it. So within this whole system and different planets being built out and different bits of trade and negotiation and interstellar spreading, It's all still a bunch of different noble feuding houses, with Throne Karaka at its very center. And in said Throne Karaka, a massive load of bureaucracy, which was delayed by time and relativity as well, because yeah, they didn't have blink gates. They didn't even have the fastest interstellar engines at the time. Everything was super slow, decades in between certain shipments between systems. Alongside the different noble houses, feuding, and this just massive Byzantium system, it just began to fall apart and fall in on itself. And at the tail end of the low Passacaglia, you have one of the planets declaring independence. So the current ruler of the time sends one of his generals, Tyran, to go out and deal with that. Massive fleet all set up, most of the forces from Caracas itself sent out to just stomp that. This General Tyran gets there eventually, deals with the problems from that planet, after a long siege of about 7 years. Less long in the scale of a lot of this other time, and more brutal, because this planet was built like a fortress. Eventually getting some messages to be called back over to Caracas, so eventually following that, as apparently there's been some political issue there, and he comes back into the middle of the last argument of kings. So as Tyran comes back, it's a shit show. Everything's a mess. Active fleets are fighting in the middle of the system. Caracas itself has become an entire war zone of different trenches spanning continents. The entire surface of Caracas scarred from orbital bombardment, some still ongoing to an extent. Different factories, bunkers have been built up. The entire planet choked with industrialization just to keep up with this effort. Different ships that have long crashed onto the surface. An asteroid that had been flung over towards the planet and hit the North Pole, throwing the entire weather system off. So it turned out, in the time that Tyran had left, the last Passacaglian died on the throne, with no obvious heir. Technically some, or at least different claimants to the throne, with different relations and relativity throwing all of this through a loop, but all these noble houses vying for the central throne Karaka. This event, by the way, the last argument of kings, is documented, at least within Union's own knowledge, as the first large-scale interstellar war. Multiple systems, multiple large-scale fleets, different interstellar projectiles used. Whole mess. So Tyran, giving an order to his different commanders and fleets, said to lock down essentially radio silence, to debate and think as they now had the largest fleet within the system that he had just entered suddenly. And after months of radio silence, eventually he opens comms to every channel and gives his response. I serve the people of Caracas and its throne. After that statement, multiple orbital bombardments, naval fleet engagements, boarding actions on different ships, and also landing craft heading down to the planet and Throne Karaka itself. An all-out assault on a system-wide scale. And in this chaos, this infighting, this mass bit of confusion, Tyran takes it. The throne first, then the system, then eventually sets off on a large campaign on the Enorum Tyrannus to take the rest of the Karakan trade baronies. And as far as they knew, the rest of humanity. With all that going on and some of those details there with the last argument of kings, we enter the Enorum Tyrannus, and it ends with a dynasticlad. An actually peaceful transference of power to a federal monarchy, essentially. Different capital planets would be set up with major houses that would get rid of any of the previous titles. You'd still be able to hold on to them, but the houses themselves weren't connected to any. From those worlds and systems, you would then have a representative that would go to Throne Karaka. It is here that there would be a balance of power between the different noble houses and systems specifically. And this is actually where we get the major house system of today. Then we enter the New Federation, which is essentially another golden age to an extent, just building infrastructure, expanding different bits of territory, filling out, building up, all nice things really, just status quo. You still have your scuffles here and there, and duels and conflict are legal, on a small scale, small enough scale. By small enough, still meaning entire regiments. But outside of that, everything's pretty fine. No new argument of kings to an extent, no massive houses throwing entire interstellar bodies at one another. Everything's great, and then an old buoy triggers. Not just an ocean buoy, an info buoy that has been sent out along one of the Lagrange points of Caracas. From before the fall, an archaic system that was left behind gets a message pinged from Earth. A message from individuals calling Earth Cradle for some reason. They had come with messages asking if they needed aid, any help to the different desperate humans that had been spread out from Cradle, and instructions on how to build something to communicate back, which the crew at the time found pretty funny because Caracas already had the equipment already installed, or built up. But eventually, message is sent back, and communication begins to go back and forth between the two, still taking forever as it's only light-based, no Omninet still. And eventually there's also physical first contact made, one that the Federal Karakin monarchy wasn't sure how to handle, with the physical contact being escorted with a noble escort as per tradition declared, making quite a few different old hardliner houses a bit upset. Also Caracas aligning itself and placing themselves within the Union calendar instead of vice versa, because as far as the majority of different Karakin people believed themselves to be as just the continuation of humanity. Cradle might have been the starting place of humanity, but the actual continuation of that civilization was on Caracas, was in the Karakin systems, not Cradle, which had thousands of years just being this hellish wasteland and eventually just inheriting all this tech. Caracas was around during those times. It had interstellar wars, it had battles, histories, and yet the federal Karakin monarchy is just letting these Union people walk in and stomp around as if they're inheritors of the galaxy? That Caracas is owned by them in some way? Relatively similar feelings would be felt over on Cradle as well. Not necessarily the exact same stance, but how dare these Karakins believe they're the head of the galaxy? How dare they think we don't inherit what they have? They're humanity, we're Union. Our whole shtick is to have humanity united. They can't stand apart from that. Our goal is noble. So with these two different sentiments and much issues in between internal politics-wise, both of the government's current feelings on how to interact with galactic politics flip, as the federal Karakin monarchy itself is pushed to mobilize and militarize, with different people taking seats within it. And over on Union side, FirstCom is replaced with SecCom, and the first Union-Karakin War begins. So, outside in the void of space where these two different fleets are meeting, turns out Union just sent a ton of projectiles not towards the fleets themselves that were coming to attack them, but towards the Caracas. This forced the hand of the Karakin fleet to divert and split itself, heading to these different projectiles to intervene, having itself be picked apart individually by Union ships. Which, even though Union had been left behind time-wise on the scale of Karakin development, in a relatively even fight to an extent, Union itself just had the bonus of all the massive vaults and the tech instantly inherited that had been built up and stored away secretly. So with a relatively even fight then split into smaller quadrants, Union just ate everything up. Though to the Karakins' effort, they did stop the projectiles, except for one. Didn't hit anything directly, impacted an ocean, killed millions and wiped away a city essentially, and the aftershock effects inflicting on billions. Caracas itself was preparing for a landed invasion, setting up the artillery batteries, mobilizing all of its military forces ground-wise, and all its other local systems scrambling to try and fill some kind of defense, waiting for Union ships to hit their sky. But strangely, those ships never come. The sky isn't filled with massive warcraft. For some reason, the Union ships just turned and left, burning outside of Caracas space. The only sign of something else going on within the Karakin system is just being that a lot of different tech and AI machines are acting strangely. The reason that fleet, by the way, was taken away is because one of our old friends just woke up, or came into existence, either or. But also just to note, the fact that machines were freaking out on Caracas itself during that same moment, not just in the Sol system? Holy shit. But outside of that, Caracas begins to mobilize still, the federal Karakin monarchy is in a no-confidence vote, and voted out, and they prepare for the second Union-Karakin War, which as it slowly heads off to begin sometime later, the Karakin fleet's just wiped. Just wiped. Not even a chance. Not even like last time with some kind of dirty trick or tactic. Just killed. The reason for this being is the fact that Union now had paracausal tech and specifically NHPs. A particular type and installation called a fleet mind, which is used and basically is the standard for military naval warfare within space, making the predictability gap a joke. You cannot fight when your movements that take months to go into effect can be instantly predicted years in advance. So back at the federal Karakin monarchy, who knew and heard of these reports of how the fleet was doing, or did, they knew that they could potentially hold out, but billions would die. All of Karakin space itself would basically be set ablaze, Union itself would probably drain itself or also be blown apart. And they decided to instead reach an arrangement with SecCom. The New Prosperity Agreement, essentially allowing Karakin trade baronies to govern itself, have individual freedoms that are respected by the nobility to an extent, and that Union has to respect nobility-wise, and essentially, even though they're technically under the hegemony, allows them to be their own independent entity in that hegemony. If the Union demands something of Karakin space, they cannot enforce that. Even to ThirdCom with its 3 pillars, the New Prosperity Agreement is still upheld. They cannot. These 3 things are a joke in most houses. But outside of that, on the Karakin side of things, they would be the suppliers of Union's expansion, of its utopian dream eventually, but in SecCom's, its conquest. All its navies, all its fleets, all its stations, all its blink gates, its situation for the Omninet and setting up that infrastructure, all of that funded and supplied by the Karakin trade baronies. Because while Union itself inherited some of that tech from the massive vaults and its huge leap in technology when it came to the Deimos event, Karakin space has been building up for thousands of years and had inherited tech initially that was alongside some of the stuff in the massive vaults. While there are gaps in that technology, The Karakin trade baronies could tear apart stars for fuel, crack planets for their raw ores, take apart entire asteroid belts for resources. They are ridiculous. Tear apart stars. That is not that's in the book. Also having one of their own ring world set up before the first Union-Karakin War. Mega projects are Karakin's thing. Well, you have the different megacorps over here, with IPSN with its shipping, SSC with its fine, high-end goods, Harrison Armory being a military-industrial complex. Karakin trade baronies are the extraction. They're the mines. They're the initial on-the-ground factories making raw resources and processing. They're the ones cracking apart planets, tearing apart stars, mining gas giants. They are the raw resource extraction of the galaxy. This institution and this agreement runs so deep that is, again, labeled as the grim truth. It is admitted by people within Union itself that of the levers of power Union has, Mana, Blinkgates, the Omninet, that the Karakin trade baronies, whoever holds that, holds one of the levers to the galaxy. That itself is one of the 4 things that allows Union to operate. To maintain its current utopian dream and lifestyle on some of those worlds, and the potential to hold it on the rest of the galaxy, it needs Caracas. Not just as its current form, but what it's doing in its current form. Not just the fact it has this agreement, but the fact it is all this raw resource extraction. These pillars go to the wayside. Okay, with that bit of dramatic flourish, we're almost through with the history. Though with that agreement and that grim truth, it goes from the new federation to the trade baronies. That's not it yet, we've still got a little more. Because it's the trade baronies for a while. It started being called that during SecCom, then you have Third Com's Revolution, then you have the First Interest War, which we talked about under the Harrison Armory videos, but in the short term, it essentially goes that, hey, SecCom's falling apart, Third Com's barely holding any of this together. The Karakin trade baronies themselves saw this as a fantastic chance to take any other claims they had around their own systems. Meanwhile, the foundations of Harrison Armory were trying to conserve whatever they could from SecCom. And so, over this squabble, they fought. And like last time, due to a tech difference and Creighton Harrison willing to just exterminate a planet, they had lost. At least a specific battle, with both sides being forced over by Union under a certain agreement to sign off and kind of stop the whole affair. In the trade, Harrison Armory would keep some of the different planets it was going for in the first place, and one of the previous claims that the Karakin trade baronies had under SecCom, the Dawnline Shore, would be upheld. Now, to briefly talk of the Dawnline Shore, this is a holy grail galaxy-wise. Colonization-wise, it is 9 habitable planets, all relatively located near each other. A chunk of them within the same systems as each other. And even then, the systems themselves being, even relatively under lightspeed-wise, really close. Like 1 or 2 years in between. Not to mention resource rich as well, not just the planets themselves, but the other uninhabited planets within the systems. This place is a gold mine. While there might be literal gold, it's more for the sense of just galactic scale. So Harrison got to keep some of its purview and its initial claims, while the Karakin trade baronies got to hold on to the Dawnline Shore. Theoretically. As within modern times, that's what's looming up to the Second Interest War, with Harrison Armory forces secretly going in and supplanting the locals within the Dawnline Shore. But with that, we're actually caught up. Oh, there's gonna be so many videos just on the history alone. That is a very dirty, very condensed summary of all that's there. But in short, we're left in our modern day with an oligarchic interstellar federal monarchy. Oh man, and just to talk about it itself, we'll talk about the planets it's based on, or at least the capital, because there's actually quite a few planets. So, Caracas, initially a temperate Gaia world when it was settled, now it's very much scarred over its various conflicts and its long history. The planet itself is home to Throne Caraca primarily, a palace city itself that is set up on 400 square kilometers. The palace. Just the palace estate. Sorry, not 400. 4 million square kilometers. 4 million square Egypt's roughly 1 million square kilometers. This is 4! Let alone that, Caracas City itself, the capital of the entire Karakin trade baronies, is a metro swath, basically a hive city, that surrounds that. That surrounds a 4 million square kilometer palace estate. Within the book itself, it's labeled that there is no city larger with more impact on its planet environment with a higher population in the entire known galaxy. The city itself left alone to uncounted billions. Not to mention the other 4 large satellite cities that had been placed along the outsides of Caracas City and the other parts of the planet. Or its populated moon. But the largest city in the known galaxy is the home to all of the bureaucratic mess that is the Karakin trade baronies. But alongside the vibe of that city and that development and some of the high-tech stuff, just to emphasize, Caracas has been around and had a 7,000 year head start on Union. 7,000 years! Some of that was with civil war and the melee on Caracas itself, some of that was a bit later in the Argument of Kings. But 7,000 years, the mega projects of a ring world able to take apart stars, currently in modern times, a second ring world under construction. That planet I mentioned was basically entirely fortified, multiple ancient mines that had literally been fortified into underground fortress complexes and bunkers that can handle and withstand multiple planetary bombardments, some of which in Caracas' scale can cause seismic activity. The sheer volume. Massive mega engineering projects to edit entire planets just to be more artistically viable and more appealing to the tastes of the nobility that rule over it. Entire terraforming ventures that have only taken place over a handful of years and decades, turning an uninhabitable moon into a luscious jungle. Weapon projects that, when they go wrong, are currently eating apart planets. Enough influence tech and infrastructure to be able to fuel all of Union. Not even the current Third Com Union, which is a lot of hands-off with the diaspora. The active military front union. The SecCom Union. You see, with this infrastructure, to further exemplify the point of how many resources are being sent out, let's say Union wants to build different bits of stations to help with orbital infrastructure, their own ships within another local system, and a Blinkgate under construction, which is a massive endeavor. But also, to hold up the three pillars, they don't want to force any of that effort onto the local planet, so they go to the Karakin Trade Baronies. With the vast pool of resources in bulk, everything needed for that is sent. A good ton of it as well, with its own shipping. It doesn't rely on IPSN. For another group that supposedly held a good 20 to 30% of Union's own shipping, the fact that the Karakin Trade Baronies relies internally on itself and entirely on itself for its own shipping, that's another string not attached, but just able to send these things in bulk and to other previous Union core worlds and current Union core worlds being added on, to not have this entire endeavor forced onto industrializing, harvesting resources from their world and system. All of that's shipped in from Karakin Space. But also not just Karakin Space. So you see, when it comes to this resource extraction, and ignoring these three pillars essentially, it's not left to just Karakin Space. The new Prosperity Agreement is to the Karakin nobility, the Throne Karaka itself, meaning it's wherever those noble titles go. Their bits of ownership, their land holdings, their mining operations in other territories. When it comes to Karakin Space, there's two different definitions for it to an extent, internally at least. You have the Concern, which are the core worlds that hold the major houses, and the jewel Caracas herself. And then you have the Interest, which is commonly secondhand for the Dawnline Shore, but stands for any holding outside of the Concern. The largest extent of this and the main prize, again that gold mine in space, the Dawnline Shore being a primary, well, ironically, a concern, which goes into some of the current politics, but the Interest stands for the Dawnline Shore and elsewhere. Different holdings of mines, different bought-out locations, different bases, different military functions, their own shipping projects and companies. Any territory or operation they hold outside of the Concern, which they do, is described as with Union itself spreading its hegemony and going throughout all of the known galaxy to an extent. The Karakin Trade Baronies also have their own periphery, which overlaps just as much. While it's not outright planets or no new major houses to an extent, it's all mines here, operations over there, a station in this system tearing apart this gas giant, making deals with the local diaspora to an extent to have their own military forces placed within their station. Their mining and industrial operations extend much farther than just the Concern and just the Dawnline Shore. They are spread through all of Union. While the majority of the noble houses care to only stay back in the Concern itself proper, their industry, their holdings, all those little places an exception, all those mining outposts, all those different stations, these don't apply. There is noble and ignoble. The status quo of how Karakin Space has operated for a long time is still held. All this talk in Third Com wanting to spread these three pillars to the galaxy has to be held up by the situation of the Karakin Trade Baronies. On top of the potential conflict with the Second Interest War is that inevitable clash of ideologies between them and Union. But to try and ward this off is the fact that a part of the new Prosperity Agreement had a permanent seat within SecCom holding the Prime Baron. Or at least open to the Prime Baron, which this current one has actually been quite profitable with. Current Prime Baron Karabem essentially wants, as a Federalist, the general peace and status quo to be maintained. Don't fight a war with Union, remain the general supplier, keep peace between the different major houses, and all is good. Also kick off Harrison Armory. In fact, within CENTCOM to a point, they've held the fourth column, a solid 20% chunk of the entire CENTCOM. 20% of the entire Central Committee, which has actually been on the decrease down 20%. A good other chunk kind of splitting to other different parts of of it. But that's going into more third com zone politics in modern time. That's a third com video. But in short, basically 20% of Union Central Committee is basically Karakin. But even though there's this talk of peace and this talk of just generally trying to keep the status quo, one thing that has changed over the course of that interest war is a 400-year-long remilitarization campaign. An entire military restructuring within Karakin space itself, internally. As its current centralized system and its own army had kind of just fallen apart or languished within the own internal house politics and not even being in use. They've now switched over to the house system of house companies, free companies. House companies themselves also not just being limited to the major houses, though there is a major house company. It's all houses. All houses have the right to hold up a house company, and the largest ones have a right to hold a specific strength. This also isn't just land forces to an extent, this also counts logistical and naval. This entire restructuring also involved the Cavalry College talking about and training military. It's all houses. All houses have the right to hold up a house company, and the largest ones have a right to hold a specific strength. There's no
Es en un plano de telaraña donde construimos nuestro hogar.
People, we are now putting back in place really important employment support, and that's really important because those who can work should work, but they often need help to do so, and that's what this Labour Party is for.
Haven't you bluntly found out tonight that even with a whopping majority, the Labour Party is just not willing to fundamentally take on reforming the welfare state? You're tinkering around the edges. The things you really wanted to do are in a skip. They're dead, they're buried.
Welfare reform is always difficult because it touches on the lives of millions of people. But we need to make changes because too many people have been written off, are left to a life on benefits when being in good work is so important, not just for their living standards, but for the sense of dignity and self-respect that good work brings. And because we know good work is so good for mental health, Labour's historic mission is to get more people into good work, and that is what we're starting to deliver.
Did you see that? Did you?
Oh, Lefty.
Right, people, I think all systems are go now. Bit of an extended introduction, that, wasn't it? Welcome to the Brews at 10. I'm your host, Lefty. This is My Left Eye's weekly live stream. That is weekday live stream. How are you brewing? Stu, I'm not bad. Thank you very much for asking. How are you? This Tuesday, Brews Day. Yeah, let us know how you're all doing in the chat. Make sure you've hit thumbs up. Give us an upvote as you enter the stream. Much appreciate that. So yes, very much on tonight's agenda, the welfare reform bill has passed, unfortunately. Stu, you're in Italy, so for you it's 11. 1 hour ahead. I imagine it's fair warm that way as well. I heard on the news earlier about Spain also suffering a heat wave, and France as well. Give us some feedback. D'Italia. Awesome stuff. Thanks for watching all the way from Italy. I'll not go off on a tangent about the political situation in Italy at the moment.
Good evening, welcome to Nirvana Live. I am Aaron Stanley. Joining me this evening, Kieran Andreo. Kieran,